I think if you are not nurturing and you are very traumatized, or you're a bit abusive, or your dynamic between your partner is negative, you would be doing a disservice to the child. So I know children are amazing and they can really revolutionize you, and you can go from being that really broken person and you can heal through the beauty of having a child. But I do think, like, when I see women who just get themselves pregnant, through a sperm bank, children need to feel like two people brought them into this world willingly. When they feel like one person didn't even want anything to do with them and their dad just, masturbated into a jar, it does something to them. There's so much curiosity. I wonder what my dad, I wonder. And more so than curiosity, there's so much abandonment. He didn't want me. Mum wanted me. And usually the woman that does that is one who's very emotionally exhausted. She's tried everything. So she's hoping for this child to give her a sense of family, and she's almost too dependent on the child. So I don't think these measures are good, even though adoption, all these things are amazing. But even when you adopt alone, they're so difficult. Children are so difficult. If they're not born out of two people's commitment and love, you can destroy them. You can really devastate them.
I completely agree. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think we need more people in the world. Like, I know that's another different
But
debate.
the thing is, they're beautiful.
Of course, but I mean, like, I think that. So when I was a kid, I used to think that like parents had everything figured out, and then when I became an adult, I realized that nobody has anything figured out. So then, when you're looking at some people, you're like, "Fuck, should they really have children?" Because some people are just not like emotionally mature enough.
And so many children will say, "My mum should never have been a mother." So many people saying that she's not ready for it. She was never nurturing. She was never caring. Of course, their existence is beautiful and amazing. They still mean something. But what happens when your parents aren't ready for you? There's a disconnect. And children are never, ever going to stop loving their parents, but they do stop loving themselves when they feel disconnected from their parents.
You kind of mentioned like daddy issues, like are associated with
Yeah, I do
previously,
talk
like
about that a
kind
lot.
of like culture, or like that just reference, I suppose, is overarching.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
It's very difficult. But first thing I would say is get two sides of the argument. Yeah. Now, some men are just deadbeat dads. They really are. Yeah. I'm not justifying. But majority of the time, and I said this before, is men typically don't give up on children, but they do give up on co-parenting if the wife is too difficult. That happens a lot. When there's some mothers who make even seeing the child a headache and really, really drive that man away, he ends up giving up on the children. And children are just collateral damage from the mum being too difficult. And then what the mum does is brainwash the children into thinking that the dad was this and the dad was that and dad was that. So that child grows up into the real world thinking dad is a prick, mum was the savior. But what they don't realize is when you start thinking 50% of you is horrible, you internalize the damage. You think 50% of you is unlovable, and your mum hates 50% of you. So damaging. So damaging. So what happens is these people become like lost and naive, and they don't know how to sustain like their sense of identity. So the first thing I would always say is try and get both sides of the story. Try and understand both sides of the story. Now, sometimes it's accessible. You see dad, he walks past you in the street, you make peace with that. It's an internal issue in dad. But other times you don't even get dad's side of the story, and you spend your whole life hating a part of you that when really he may have been fighting for you. Maybe he went to court, maybe he tried, but your mum made it so impossible. Once you get both sides of the story, you start looking at both people as you would look at a disabled person. So just like a disabled person can't run if they've got broken legs, some people are so broken emotionally they can't give love to their child.
How do you do that first step?
Oh, you know what? I hate to talk on issues that I haven't experienced myself because I don't know how difficult it is. And even me, when I fight with my dad, I'll be like, I'm not talking to him, like he should talk to me, blah, blah. But what I would say with the first step is having an internal dialogue where you try and understand their perspective. And you try and understand, okay, mum was maybe having an affair, or mum was really physically abusive. Do you think maybe dad had a reason for kind of letting go and starting again? And do you think maybe dad had a reason for... I know a lot of men experience this. What happens with men when they grew up, when they were kids, maybe dad had an affair on mum, and mum not brainwashed, but told the guy, your dad did this, and they hate the dad. But then when they become adults, maybe they have affairs. And then they start seeing things from their dad's perspective, and they're like, fuck, I haven't spoken to dad in 12 years, but now I'm having an affair. Am I this? Am I that guy? Then they start to bond. So internally. So the reality is you are never going to live a fulfilling life when you hate a parent. You're just not, unfortunately. I wish it was different, because there are some parents that are so super unlovable. And there's been times even in my life where I'm like, Mom, I'm so sick of you, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is we can't be whole without the two people that birthed us. Now, the best thing is, I'm not saying forgive everybody, but try and create some connection if you can, even if it's at arm's length, even if it's with boundaries. Create that connection selfishly. Do it for you. Do it for you, because I promise you, those underlying anxiety, depression, coping mechanisms, addictions, they come from not feeling loved by two people that birthed you. So try your absolute best to have compassion or some form of connection whilst protecting your peace.
That's like amazing advice, because there's so many people who struggle in that.
I know, and it breaks my heart.
But they're not willing. I think it's just a step.
Yeah, and I get so much hate for this online, especially by single moms. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about, this, that, and the other. Here's the thing. Yes, I don't know what it's like to be a single mom, but I know what it's like when I had a student in my classroom crying, saying, I actually miss my dad, but my mum won't let me text him. I know what that's like. I know what it's like when that child gets older and, the kids are like, oh, my dad's taking me football. And they're like, yeah, my dad's taking me football. And they've never met their dad. I know what that looks like, because you as a mum will ignore that because you just want to protect your own ego and say, my kids are fine. They're doing well in school. I know what that looks like. I've worked with these kids my whole life. I've dedicated a lot of time to these kids. I remember being in parents' evening and saying things like, wait till I tell your dad. And they're like, Mum, I don't know my dad. Or I remember, and this is where it really triggered me. It was Father's Day, and I had a student come in, and he was only 13 years old, and he said, Miss, it's Dickhead's Day today. It's Dickhead's Day today. And I said, sorry, what? And I said, it's Father's Day. What are you talking about? She goes, my mum says it's Dickhead's Day today. And I said, okay. And I didn't want to tell him off because he was obviously trying to release something. My mum says that Dad used to do that, and listed all of these things that Dad did. And I looked at this boy, and I had to take a minute. And I said, okay, because I started to cry. Yeah, because I was thinking, in her desperate attempt to find emotional connection with her children and release her anger and resentment, she's causing this young boy so much damage. She has no idea. She has no idea what she's doing.
Projecting her opinions.
She has no idea what she's doing to that boy. Yeah, so many anxieties, insecurities, gender issues come from this. And there's a part of me that really wanted to call her and have a word with her. But obviously, confidentiality, I can't do certain things, child protection and all that stuff, I can't do it. But when I work with young boys who have real issues, especially boys, I say, because we all know about girls with daddy issues, but when I work with young boys who are not achieving in school, I'm going to get emotional. Wow. I'm going, maybe because I'm thinking about my kids, my students and stuff.
Maybe I'm just a good host.
Maybe because I'm diving into my connection with my dad and how much strength I got from my connection with my dad. And I really hate to think people are deprived of that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people will project their opinions on other people without understanding the circumstances.
Kids, if you take the perspective of a child, even if his dad's a dickhead, but you tell him your dad loved you so much, I'm so sorry, he used to always ask about you. And even if he never did, you make a Christmas card and say, Dad sent you that. Do you know what that does to a child's self-esteem? It's immeasurable. But when you say Dad doesn't pay for you, Dad has got new kids, this, that, and the other, that single mom doesn't deserve those children.
Creates more of a friction than anything else. A bit more tragic. But what about if people lost a parent quite young? Have you any experience with that?
Yeah, losing a parent is very different to separating, because here's the thing: with grief, we can make peace with grief. We understand that it's no one's hands, it's not a choice. Abandonment is, my dad chose somebody else, my mum chose somebody else. It's a completely different experience. So it has a massive impact on self-worth. What grief does is have a massive impact on their future. It makes them think the future is uncertain. So what happens then, sometimes they engage in self-sabotaging behavior, or they get depressed because they feel like the future is bleak. They start to worry about future. Whereas the abandonment is more the current kind of anxieties. Maybe they're bad at school and this, that, and the other. the grief of the loss of a parent is very, very damaging for a child, but in a different way. Yeah, in a completely different way.
Can they grow from the experience in some aspect, because like they
Absolutely.
realize the severity of the world?
Here's how they grow from it. You keep the memory of the child, of the parent alive, and you elevate it for that child. So this is a great way to, here's the thing. If I lost, God forbid, I can't even say the sentence, but if somebody lost their father young, but you say, your dad used to love it when you did this, or your dad used to do this, or your dad used to do that, and you elevate the dad's status to that child, it's so motivating. Yeah, it's super. But then what some parents do, or some families do, is they pretend it never happened. They don't mention the dad. That curiosity creates sadness in the child. Yeah, but you create that image. Here's the thing. Our imagination, our brain is incredible. If I tell you to imagine something, you experience it. So if I say to you, Dad loves you so much, you start feeling loved. Our brain creates that connection. So you elevate the experience and you elevate the status of that parent, and you direct the child using it. Your dad loved it when you used to do this. Your dad would be so proud if you did that. Your dad used to love football or whatever it is. You create that connection, even if it's a pseudo connection. And also, maybe I'm speaking from a religious perspective, but creating the hope that they will reunite. There is an afterlife, and teaching them that, it helps.
The perspective is just so important no matter what you're doing, whether it's like a single parent or someone who's lost someone tragically, because you see it
I
kind of
find these conversations really tough.
Yeah. Because I think it's
I think
the reason why is it plays such a big impact, but people don't really discuss these things. I think.
Are your parents alive?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine. Yeah, okay, yeah.
But I've had friends, and I have close friends that I've met that, like, their dad died when they're younger, or their mom died.
I can't talk about these kind of things. I think I start thinking, because my parents are getting older.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get anxious.
I'm the exact same. I can't think about that, and I've never had like a tragic death
too.
in my house.
I've been very lucky. Praise be to God.
Incredibly lucky for. But I just think it's. The reason why I'm saying that is because like it seems like it's a barometer for how people set up their life. So some guys go on to become incredibly successful in the financial world.